Good morning. Welcome to Compassion Fatigue, Drawing from an Empty Well Too Many Times. Our speaker today will be Jeff Kaiser. This presentation will be 1 hour. All participants have been placed on mute. If you have a question during the presentation, please enter it in the chat. He will answer as many questions as time permits at the end of the presentation. A certificate of attendance for CEUs will be emailed. I will now turn it over to our presenter.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar on battling compassion fatigue. And I want to tell you that it's an honor to be able to share with you a little bit of my experience and my journey in dealing with compassion fatigue. We'll look at some of the symptoms, emotionally, physically, and then we'll offer some good news of how to overcome it and how to deal with it. So just a little bit about myself. I've been a chaplain with Sarpy County Sheriff's Office. I'm the lead chaplain for them. I've been with them for 11 and a half years. I'm also the senior pastor at Harvest Church in Omaha. I've been doing that for 7 years. Prior to that, I traveled internationally quite a bit. And even before all that, I actually worked in radio. I got my start at Z92 in Omaha and CD 105 and used to go by the air name of Smilin' J. Michaels because I thought Jeff Kaiser was pretty dorky for rock radio. Not that that was any better, but I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, and we'll see if we can make the magic happen here. We're going to take a look at how to draw. You know, when you draw from an empty well too many times, I do need to show you, this is my partner, and not only is he my family dog, but we're a certified pet therapy team. And this is who I affectionately call Henry the Wonder Dog. And he's not quite 3. He's a golden retriever. He got sworn into the sheriff's office in July of 2021. And it's been amazing having him as a resource, not only to our officers, but to the community. And I have a ton of stories just watching the impact of watching Henry work. So anyway, thank you again for making time. And we'll look forward to, hopefully this will give you some tools to help you out in this arena. Compassion fatigue is something that really comes on rather quickly. Burnout, it takes time. You know, it's like if you don't treat or deal with compassion fatigue, what happens is that it can eventually lead to burnout. And compassion fatigue often hits first responders, those in the medical profession, chaplains, nurses that deal in specialty, cancer care nurses, things like that. And what happens is that when people begin to deal with compassion fatigue, there's this feeling of the impossibility of ever, like you're not making any difference at all. And it can really be overwhelming. Actually, compassion fatigue can actually be described as secondary post-traumatic stress. And it's often as a result of caring for people. Now you'll feel or you'll empathize with what they're going through, even though you're not reliving the traumatic event. And that's really the big difference. So like I said, it can lead to burnout. It comes on quick. And the good news is that it can leave rather quickly. So when we start looking at some of the causes of compassion fatigue, it's really, again, as I'd mentioned, it's people that have a strong identification with those that are suffering, those that have been in trauma. There's feelings of helplessness, like, man, am I even making a difference in anybody's life? You know, oftentimes people get into certain lines of work because they really do want to help people. And sometimes, you know, depending upon what you're doing, it really can be a little bit overwhelming. And you think, wow, I don't feel like I feel like my wheels are just spinning in the mud. So, and what happens is because we want to help, we eventually end up placing their needs above our own, which is not healthy as well. So some of the symptoms of this is that people may tend to isolate. They may complain a lot or voicing complaints. You may notice maybe their hygiene isn't like what it used to. Somebody that used to be meticulous, all of a sudden not keeping their hair groomed, or maybe their physical appearance, clothes appear to be dirty, things like that. They become apathetic, and they really do have difficulty in concentrating. There's other compulsive behaviors that become involved with compassion fatigue. And some of that is overeating or drinking excessively or turning to substance abuse, promiscuity, excessive sexual behaviors, maybe gambling, things like that. And then from the physical side of things, it can affect you physically. May have a lot of gastric issues. Maybe you have recurring colds because your immune system is down. Maybe starting to experience a lot of flashbacks to some traumatic events, or you're having recurring nightmares. So these are things that, to really pay attention to if you're in an industry where it feels like you're dealing with compassion fatigue. In the work-related area, you'll start to avoid certain tasks. You may be even feeling this reduced ability to feel empathy, or you start cranking out the sick days, or there's a lack of joy in your life. And I just want to share a little bit of my story before we go on here, because I've been through this a couple of times, especially serving as a chaplain at the sheriff's office. I'm exposed to a great deal of death and trauma. And, it's like when you hear the scream of someone that you've had to notify that their loved one is dead, whether they've taken their own life or it's a result of an accident or a homicide or whatever. I mean, that's something you never forget. And I can remember the first time I really started feeling the effects of this. I had just, I was called out to 5 suicides on a weekend. Then I had to officiate 3 funerals in 4 days. And all of that happened in about an 8 or 9 day span. And I thought, man, I'm telling you what, I could very easily go to selling snow cones on the beach at that point, because I was just done. And unfortunately, there's not always time to process all that. So what happened is that, I went from call to call to call. I had these funerals. I was meeting with grieving families. And here's where I noticed something was getting a little bit off. I found myself getting easily irritated in traffic. And that is not my nature. I'm pretty easygoing. I've been often falsely accused of telling bad jokes, and I'll emphasize falsely accused. But I'd find myself, I'd be in the left lane, and I'm not kidding you. It's something like every time I was in the left lane, I was behind somebody driving a good 10 to 15 miles under the speed limit. I would never ask anybody to speed that, but come on. And I'm like, why am I getting so bounced by this? This is ridiculous. I found myself, I like to scuba dive, and I found myself looking for YouTube videos on some really cool places to scuba dive. And I found myself not wanting to connect with people that are really grieving. I'm like, I just didn't feel like I had the capacity. I had a friend of mine, him and his wife were going to go see this movie one time, and it was about these firefighters in Arizona, and they would fight wildfires. And I knew that these guys had died. It was very tragic. But towards the end of the movie, they go tell one of the wives, and she let out that scream. I never thought I'd ever hear anybody be able to replicate that without going through something. Well, when I say I got mad, it wasn't like I got up and cursed. I did. I was ticked though. I just got up and I walked out. I went to the bathroom like, I didn't want to pay for this. I get this stuff in real life. Why would I come to a movie theater and watch this? And then I began to realize, there's something maybe not emotionally totally healthy with Jeff Kaiser at that moment, and start doing some inventory. And I was asked to speak at a pastor's retreat. Now, I want you to know I'm going to make some references to my faith in the course of this topic. So I want you to know I'm not trying to proselytize you. I'm just sharing my journey with you, okay? So I want to make sure you understand that. But I really began to pray, and I came across this thing called compassion fatigue. And then it's kind of like, the light bulb comes on and I'm like, okay, now I'm beginning to understand a little bit about what I was going through. I was emotionally spent. I wanted to withdraw. That's it. There's a conservative estimate that I've done. I will just say well over 200 death notifications in these 11 and a half years. And I want to make sure I don't wear that as a badge of honor. That's why I don't keep track of how many I do anymore. But that's a conservative estimate. So it was just like, it was petty things that I found myself getting irritated and then getting called out to my first infant death. And I'm like, oh man, this is almost too much. I'm like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. So one of the things that I had done is, as I was preparing to speak to these pastors at this retreat, and especially in this topic, because you give, and you're dealing with people in crisis all the time. And it's not, I mean, some things are unavoidable, but I didn't have healthy boundaries in my life. So what I did, and I was on a journey without even realizing it, I had my team pray for me, because that's a key element of who I am altogether. One of the things that I do is I like to lift. And I had to be lifting like really heavy weight, because I felt like that was a way where I could burn some of that stuff that I was feeling. And I really needed some separation from that. And by that, I mean going on vacation and putting up some boundaries where I could. I wasn't always successful at putting up the boundaries, because it's by the nature of what I do, whether it's pastoring or serving as a chaplain at the sheriff's office, there's always somebody in need. But I had to learn the art of, when can I say no? Now, I wish I could sit here and say, I have a little gold ribbon hanging on my wall and says, hey, well done, Jeff. You've been able to master that. No, but I have a day off that I really am super protective of. And unless I'm on call with the sheriff's office, and unless it's an absolute critical crisis emergency, somebody's dead, right, that I need to, within my church or whatever. But other than that, I'm like, I'm not going to respond to phone calls. I'm not going to start responding to emails, because I've got to have that separation. And as I was talking with my wife about that, one of the things that I said, listen, I can't go just for a week. My life is too crazy intense. I'm going to need to take at least 10 to 12 days off. Plus, then you add in the travel time, because I need that. It takes usually 4 or 5 days, sometimes, just to decompress and feel like I've unplugged. I remember it was in that season, I had someone call me and they said, hey, Jeff, I really need to meet with you. And I'm like, I'd love to, but I'm about tapped. And they were pretty persistent. And I've known this person a long time. And I thought, okay, if they're asking, then it must be important. And they had said they wanted to meet. And I said, listen, I've literally got a 30-minute window. I don't mean to be rude. I've just got a lot going on right now. They said, that's okay. I would probably only need 10 minutes. So anyway, I drove to their place, and they told me they were praying for me. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you. That's really nice. That's very gracious. God bless you, right? But then they said that the Lord really put it on their heart that they were to pay to send me to Hawaii. I was stunned. I literally broke down and just started sobbing. I didn't even know how to react. But I knew in that moment that is what I needed, and not even really realizing it, because we'll get in the grind and we'll keep churning it out, right? We'll keep going on, because that's what we do. And I was absolutely stunned at their generosity. I don't know if they ever spoke to my wife or not, but we went for 2 weeks. And the first 4 or 5 days, I hardly spoke. We'd lay out on the beach or on the lanai and just enjoyed the sound of the ocean. And my wife asked me, you okay? I said, actually, I'm really good. But I had come to such a place of deep rest It felt like the cork was pulled and everything started draining out of that. It was to say miraculous might sound a bit cheesy, but it was so needed in that moment, and making, setting those boundaries for, how do I say no? Because there's always going to be somebody in need. Always. There's always somebody in crisis. And to realize that I'm not always that answer, I remember reading the story about Mother Teresa one time, and these nuns would come to Calcutta, India, and she had this house of hope, but it was a place where people would go to die. And so these young nuns would get there, and she'd give them this big plate of food that they, say, hey, you got to eat. And there was one nun that said, I can't, people are dying. She said, if you're not strong, then you're useless to me. And you'll either be one of these that are dying, or you might as well leave. You're here to serve. And that sounded a little harsh at first, but I began to understand the principle behind that. So as we think about some of these areas where we want to avoid, now to this day, I would say I've had a couple of bouts of compassion fatigue, and the most recent one was even this last fall. For me, it's kind of like short-term memory. I'm spinning a lot of plates, and I'm usually pretty good about keeping everything going and knowing my calendar and everything. But, doing this webinar back in October, I completely missed an email from Tammy, and I'm like, I felt terrible. No excuses, but it was a wake-up call. It's like, Kaiser, you better practice what you're preaching here, kid, because, you can't afford to let things slide and keep grinding it out. You have to say no, and you got to make time to put some, to keep yourself healthy. So, with Henry, my therapy canine that we go to, that we work together with, he has his own Instagram. The dog's got more social media than I do. It's crazy. Henry the Wonder Dog on Instagram and Facebook. But it's like, it just cracks me up on how people want to follow this dog, but people will post videos and they'll show their dog dying or something. I'm like, I don't have the capacity. It's like, I'm giving out so much emotion. I can't sit there and invest in even a 10-second video where these people are grieving the loss of their pet, which I know is precious to them. So it's a bit of a journey, and I'm just being real with you about some of the struggle in that. But overall, I'd say I'm in a pretty good spot, and not carrying things or anything like that. But it comes on quick and it can go quick. So let's go back to our slides here, and oh, there we go. So, you don't want to, if you're finding yourself wanting to do these things, you could be suffering some of the influences of compassion fatigue. Now, on the emotional side of things, there's things that, to really be aware of, like mood swings, restlessness, irritability, oversensitivity, anxiety. Maybe there's excessive use of substances, alcohol, drugs, maybe battling some depression, anger and resentment, the loss of objectivity, memory issues. I'd shared a little bit about how it affects short-term memory, poor concentration, focus, maybe judgment. When people get it, when they're struggling with this, they want to look for a way to make it stop. They want it to stop hurting. They want to make that all go away. And they think, wow, all of a sudden affair sounds pretty interesting and pretty exciting. And it's really not the answer. It's the problem will still be there. On the physical side of things, your body's going to respond to all this. Headaches. For me, I had some digestive issues, and it meant I was eating a lot of Tums, not even realizing it. Where, I'd have 3 and 4, usually 3 or 4 at a time, but it was happening probably 4 days a week. And I'm like, that can't be normal. Muscle tension, because you're when you're stressed, everything tightens up. Sleep disturbances. Never underestimate the value of a good night's sleep. And for me personally, I've always done pretty well when I was younger, I could do 4 and 5 hours without a problem and be supercharged all day. Now that the miles have racked up a little bit, actually, I feel pretty good on 6.5. Occasionally I might get more. It's not, but my body just wakes up, but you want to pay attention to that. And that maybe mean put the phone down for a half hour to an hour before you go to bed. The fatigue, always feeling like you're constantly drained. Cardiac issues, maybe chest pressure, chest pain, having heart palpitations, or your heart's in like a tachycardia. I mean, your body's going to respond, and then your body will let you know, listen, something's out of whack here. For me, I saw some of the emotional thing. I saw some of the physical thing. And for me, it was mostly, just eating Tums. I felt like I had heartburn all the time. And even though my physicals, they'd come back good and the numbers are good and all that. But so those are just some things to be aware of as you're maybe doing an inventory about all that. Dr. Bill Hetler, he is the co-founder of the National Wellness Institute. And he developed a model of wellness, and it really is involving about 6 different forms. It's like dealing with the physical, emotional, spiritual, occupational, social, and environmental was added later. And, it's like in our day and age, people are afraid to talk about the spiritual aspect because, we don't want to start getting convoluted between church and state. And yet, regardless of what your faith background is, it's an important part of who you are and an outlet for you. For me, I pray, I worship, I play guitar, not very well. That's usually very private between me and the Lord, I'm just going to say. So there's outlets, and we want to take a look at some of those things of, developing and being whole as a person. Our culture, I believe, is so geared and driven for, hey, you know what? It's a badge of honor to be a workaholic. Well, it's really not. It's an unhealthy balance. And, sometimes we're in a position, well, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. And how do you navigate that? Well, and that's tough. And quite honestly, many of us draw our identity from what we do. Now, is that pointing a finger? And no, listen, I've been there and done that. And we do get a great deal of satisfaction from what we do. But if that's all we are, I don't believe we're whole, and I don't believe we're complete. So I believe that we can take a great deal of enjoyment in our work. But if that is life, I believe you're missing out on some really other key aspects to be healthy emotionally and physically, spiritually, all of that. So when we start looking on some self-care, because we've just taken a look at some of the symptoms, emotionally, physically, right? Some of the things that we may go through and experience. But that path to wellness, first of all, really be kind to yourself. Sometimes we're not, because, we often look through a grid of ourselves that maybe not be in the most healthy manner. It's very easy for us to find and be very critical of ourselves. It's very easy to find fault within ourselves. Well, I should do this better. Oh, if I were only a few pounds lighter. Oh, if I was only, right? Be kind to yourself. Clarify some boundaries. That's hard. Like I said, if I had mastered the art of saying no, that would be, but I'm on a journey too. And it's still a process with me as well. But learn to express your needs verbally. Now, my wife and I, we've been married for 33 years. I keep reminding her she's the one that said yes, so she's kind of stuck. We have 3 kids, 8 grandkids, and 1 great-grandchild, plus Henry the Wonder Dog. But when I started serving as a chaplain, I was dealing with things I had not really been exposed to before. I'm a verbal processor. I don't like to internalize. And for me, when I verbally process, it's like thinking out loud, because I can have a thought that seems like, maybe it's very critical of myself. But when I verbalize it, it's like, well, that's stupid, right? But learn to express your needs verbally. And so there are times like when I go to my wife, I say, listen, I need to verbally process. So she is one of the most compassionate, caring people I've ever known. And she's a fixer. So, she wants to fix me, right? She's like, well, I just want to help. I get it. Sometimes you just need to let me verbally process, because that's a way of kind of emptying the tank. So it's helped, knowing when, hey, I'm not going to share the gory details of this call, but just let me think out loud a little bit on that. When you're looking at some health building exercises, there's an old adage. I mean, you are what you eat. I think coffee's a food group by itself. Don't judge me. I'm just saying. But eating healthy makes a difference. Drinking plenty of water. And you think, water's boring. It may be. They've got plenty of things that you can put in it now to help that up. But, I know that when I'm super stressed, like I will lift 3 times a week. I'm not some Adonis bodybuilder, but I know what helps me burn stress out of my life. Walking the dog. I mean, we do training, usually 3 or 4 days a week where I do continual like advanced obedience training with Henry. And then I have a retractable leash because I don't want him getting burned out, because he really absorbs what people feel. He'll be exhausted after we do a day at schools or we've met with people and all of that. And so when I put the retractable leash on him, he knows he is just free to wander and smell. And I'm not giving him commands. He just gets to be a dog. So building those healthy exercises, and you may have some physical limitations, but find out what you can do. I really want to encourage you, my friend, of developing a healthy support system. People that are going to enhance your life and not drain from it, right? That that group may be very small. For me, the further I've gone in leadership in my life, the smaller that circle has become. And that's just a reality, and it's okay. But the people that I have in my life, I trust explicitly. So, they're people that will tell me the truth. They're not just cheerleaders, but they'll be honest with me. And I know they love me. So when they say something to me, they're not saying anything to be unkind or rude or anything like that. So once you clarify your boundaries, you got a team around you or some people that you really trust. It may take time to develop that team. There's a lot of exercise programs you can look at, just something to put a little bit more of a balance. And it can be a challenge. I know my days are very, very full, but I have to be really intentional about that. When I would be when I would stress eat sometimes, and, like frozen yogurt was kind of my go-to, but I've like, what, rather have a bowl, I can have just a couple of tablespoons. It gives me the taste, and it's just changing some of those patterns. When developing that support system, make sure they're people that you can trust. That's really a big thing. When you maybe learn a hobby, like I said, I play guitar. I've kind of got sausage fingers myself, so I'm certainly not going to get up in front of people to play. It's just something I enjoy. And it's just really, it's something that's very private for me that I do in my prayer time with the Lord. But that's, what I'd love to do? I would love to learn how to paint. I love bright colors. And I saw this video of this lady, man, she's got 2 paintbrushes and she's going to town and some incredible stuff. I'm like, I'm not there. But you know what? If I don't ever take a chance, right? So, but have people in your life that are willing to contribute to your well-being. It's really important. There's enough people that are willing to be negative to you, right? When you learn, or in the process of learning of living a balanced life, Sing and dance in silent, find a way to learn how to do that off switch. We're living in a day where the accessibility through texting and social media, and it's like you can never get away from this. It's always, and it's like there are times it's like, okay, now I'm in a profession where I'm often needed, but I also have to learn to say, you know what, if I'm going to go on a date with my wife, then that's it. I'm not going to, if she doesn't feel like she's a priority in my life, well, then I've failed her as a husband. And she's very understanding, but I don't ever want to take advantage of that. So, if you can, find some ways to invest your life into some worthy causes, right? Again, it's that unbalance. If it's just work, if there's things that you do that feel out of order, there's a guy, I would recommend a book by Dr. Kevin Gilmartin. It's called Emotional Survival for Cops. I think he's got it now for first responders. But this guy was a cop for 20 years. When he retired, he went on to get counseling, got his PhD. And so now he travels and he does all these seminars. I like him because he's just pretty straightforward. He just doesn't beat around the bush. And I appreciate that kind of thing. But when I went and heard him speak, he said he was at this conference with 2,000 cops. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you a scenario, and then you can let me know what you think. He says, I come in, I'm your new chief. And day one, I implement a new policy. From this point forward, every time you're getting out of the cop car, you're putting a hat on your head. No exceptions. Now, what do you think about that? There's a lot of grumbling. And one guy says, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to fight you tooth and nail on it. And Dr. Gilmartin says, perfect. I own you. And the guy looked really stunned. And he said this, he said, because when you're off the clock, you're going to go home and this is going to consume you. You're going to be so irritated with me and I'm going to steal joy out of your life. I'm going to steal time away from your family because you're going to be so preoccupied about battling something that you really have no control over. And is it really that big a deal? I thought, man, that's perspective. And, depending upon the kind of work you do, not everybody's going to share the things that you go through. And you can't really expect people to. I remember hearing this cop, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, one time, I got this phone call from my daughter. She had just started driving and she called me. She's crying, hysterical. Dad, I need you to come. There's death. I've been in an accident. And where are you? And he's like flying to get to where she's at. She's not far away. And he expected to see all these fire trucks and ambulances and everything. Instead, he sees a woman with her arm around his daughter's shoulder. And he's kind of looking like, what is the deal? Well, his daughter sees him and she runs up to him sobbing and hugs him. Dad. He says, honey, what's wrong? I was driving and I hit a squirrel and killed it. I can almost hear the groans from here. I mean, honestly, right? And I'm like, wow. But I understood what he was saying. He said, Jeff, not everybody will share your perspective. Not everybody's going to share the things that you have gone through. And what's important to them are going to seem pretty minuscule to you. So give some grace, but I just thought that was rich. And so anyway, as you're finding people, learning how to find that switch, I want to give you some exercises because I believe that teaching without application is useless, right? And if we can't apply it, okay, well, I mean, we may have our coffee and eat a sandwich while you're hearing this guy drone on, but I really want to encourage you, list some things that bring you joy. And if you're saying there is no joy, then I really, really want to encourage you to find somebody to talk to. But list some things that bring you joy. And this is just for you, if you want to share it with somebody, cool. But that, as you think in your life, what has worked well to restore you and to renew you? I've shared a couple of things. I might play guitar. I love walking the dog. I love training the dog. It's nice because I don't have to concentrate on anything but that in that moment. Taking some time off. I mean, scheduling, vacations if you can do that. Name 3 things that you feel grateful for today. Sometimes, let's face it, unless you're living under a rock, we're in some pretty crazy times. And people are, honestly, it feels like the whole world is this dry tinder and it's just waiting for a spark to ignite it. People are so quick to explode. The road rage and all of these things, people are wound super tight. But what are you grateful for today? Name at least 3 things. I would encourage you to keep making the list, right? Today. Yesterday's done. Tomorrow's not here yet. So, what made you laugh today? Laughter's big in the Kaiser household. I love to tell jokes. Now, I also love to share facts. And there's a fact that happy cows produce more milk. So, the farmer will go whisper in one ear and it comes out the other. I'm not even sorry for that. But laughter actually is beneficial to you. There's actually things that are good for you that releases the feel-good stuff in the mind and all that. But what made you laugh? It's easy to look at the dark side and the negative and all of that. But find something that makes you laugh. I've got a pretty big sense of humor. We do gentle pranks here. I don't want anybody getting hurt. I see some of these pranks, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't be doing that, but you get the idea. What's your passion? What do you enjoy doing? What fuels you? And sometimes this might be a tough one for you. That old saying that you can't see the forest through the trees. That may be where you're at. And it may be difficult to find, but what fuels you? What really restores you physically, emotionally, spiritually, right? Finding that balance for your soul. And your soul is really what is your mind, your will, and your emotions. But find those things that what you can control. Find ways to acknowledge loss and grief. I would say sometimes in our culture, we don't do so well in letting people grieve. If you've ever had to put down a pet, that's tough. It's tough because they become such a part of the family. And there are people, well, that's stupid. Well, you know what? It's not. An animal that gives such unconditional love and all of a sudden they're no longer there, it is painful. But there's loss, right? Find a place where you can be renewed. Acknowledge ways that you can grieve or acknowledge the loss. You don't want to dwell in it because you definitely want to be moving forward and know what you control and what you can't control. Sometimes we spend so much time getting wound up over things that we have zero control over. I was just talking with a buddy of mine yesterday, and we were, sharing life. And one of the things that he learned, he said, the only thing I can control is to a situation is how I respond to it emotionally and physically. And it's really true. That's the only control we have. We go through stuff and people can be rude and mean and all those other things. But I'm faced with a choice. I can either choose to take the bait and want to get into some kind of argument with them. Well, I'm right. And I need to defend you can, but if you rebuke a fool, you yourself are the one that gets hurt because there's really no winning that argument. Some people are just simply twisted and there's no way you're going to have any other conversation with them. But don't spin your wheels on people that, it's like fruitless arguments. And I want to encourage you about being careful of the Eustis. Are you familiar with the Eustis? Well, I used to do this and I used to do that, right? Yeah, I used to do that. it's very easy to get caught up in that. So it's very, and sometimes there are seasons of life. I love being outdoors. I love nature. I love the ocean. Why I'm stuck in Nebraska, well, that's a conversation me and God have been having for a long time. So, but so what you can do is you're doing the balancing exercise in your life. You're finding your passion. You're finding ways to balance and restore your soul. Find somebody to talk to. The pain you feel, believe it or not, is normal. So many times we're made to feel, well, I just need to suck it up. Well, maybe, but do you? I really want to encourage you, get some exercise, eat properly. A lot of sugary foods, while chocolate is another food group, I believe, but a steady diet of it, probably not so healthy, is it? And being in just wanting to, your body will respond. Try to get enough sleep. There's a lot of studies out there about the benefits of sleep. If you can, take some time off. Now, remember, if you're burning through a lot of sick time because of compassion fatigue, I remember hearing the story of this cop in Las Vegas. Him and his wife now have an organization, The Pain Behind the Badge. But he talked about, he went on all these calls and he was at the suicide of a 13-year-old. He got to his car and just wept. He had never dealt with all the death and all the trauma that he'd seen over his career. And fortunately, he was able to get some help, him and his wife, and, they're still married, and he finished his career strong and all that. But what happened, though, is he was burning through his vacation time. He was burning through sick time, and his wife like, hey, what's going on? But he never shared with her until he really hit that crash point. If you can, develop some interest in hobbies. Those things are really, we don't want them to be escape mechanisms, but it's just something to enhance your life. Right now I'm in a season where I'm just spinning a lot of plates, and until this season ends, I would love to learn how to paint. I just, I have that side that I would just love to take bright, brilliant colors and make something incredible. So I admire people that can do that, although my artistic skills are limited to stick figures. So there's some things you can do, some things I want to encourage you not to do. That's blame others, work harder and longer, self-medicate, right? Well, it's so-and-so's fault. Don't neglect your needs, right? It's about you being whole as a person. The other side of that, I do want to encourage you to be careful about impulsive actions. Hey, let's just go buy that new car, and all of a sudden you're compounding a debt that is another layer of stress and burden for you. Or, you know what, my spouse, they're just jerks. They're this, they're that. I'm just gonna dump them out of my life. Now, I'm just saying, I'm not saying there may not be issues, but sometimes those are impulsive. Well, if I get this person out of my life, it's going to be better. Or they want to go off and have an affair. So it's just about, keeping some healthy patterns for your life, and not walking into things that may be some self-destructive behaviors. Because there's no doubt with the stress of today's age and all of that, we're seeing a rise in alcoholism, substance abuse, even prescribed medicine abuse, right? So, but people are looking for these outlets. And, if you got pets, I'm just saying, this dog has been as much for me as it has been for the law enforcement community and the residents of Sarpy County. This dog is extremely attached to me, very bonded. We started working together at 8 weeks when I got him at 8 weeks old, and started training and working with him. And now he gets a little wound if I don't take him with me, But I had a student ask me, what's the best thing about working with Henry? And I said, honestly, it's looking at people's expressions when they see him, whether they're an adult or a child. So anyway, I hope those are some things that put a few tools in the tool belt to help you as you navigate. And if you're battling compassion fatigue, I do want to give you some hope that it comes on quick, but it can also go quick. As you know, you give yourself some boundaries, give yourself some space, take care of yourself, right? And maybe try up some new routines and things like that. We're about it's about 46 after the hour. Gosh, that sounds like old radio. My bad. Sorry about that. But I do want to open up for some questions in our time. So I would say fire away.
Okay, one individual asked, how can we help someone else who is fatigued as you described with these solutions, especially if they are resistant?
That is a great question. I know it's so weird to think that people would be stubborn, right? But people are people, and you can gently encourage them. But I've always had a saying, you can't teach people that don't want to be taught. And, to try to do an intervention, unless they're crashing and burning, man, that's a tough one, because unfortunately it's very hard. Again, I mentioned to see the forest through the trees. If they don't want the help, I would encourage, just keep encouraging them. Maybe even in a passive role of, hey, do you want to, our grandkids gave us this gift certificate one Christmas for palette Pinot, is that right? Anyway, it's a thing. You go and you sit in there, you can drink wine and paint and all that. And we had a ball. But maybe it's like taking someplace like that, or try to get them out of the routine of life. Now, that may be one option, but it's a great question. It's not easy, because if somebody doesn't want the help, you can't force them. All you can do is keep encouraging.
A number of participants wanted the name of the book repeated again. So,
absolutely, it's called Emotional Survival. And I think it's for first responders or cops, but the principles for really emotional survival, say for first responders, by Dr. Kevin Gilmartin, or emotional survival for cops. I think he's got a couple of variations out there, but.
Would you be willing to share the slides you presented today?
Of course.
Okay, I will get those from you, and I can share them with the attendees.
Absolutely. I have this in a Keynote. Do you need a PowerPoint instead? Because I can convert that. That's not a problem.
That would be great. Thank you.
We can do either.
Okay.
I do everything on Mac, so Keynote is fine.
Nice. Excellent. Any other questions?
I'm looking at the chat. There is a comment. I've always been amazed by the resilience of correction workers. They often get forgotten when it comes to responders, police, fire, etc. They all deserve praise and thanks. Another question came across. Would you say that compassion fatigue is significantly contagious?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. A lot of it may depend upon the working conditions. When working in corrections, there's just a whole level of stress there that most people have no idea of. And it's like, whether in law enforcement or first responders, many times people, they have their circle within their workforce, right? And they end up losing friends outside of that. And, just speaking for some cops, I know, they become cops, and then all of a sudden their non-cop friends began to disappear. Well, I get tired of them asking questions. I get it, but keep those people in your life if you can. If they're toxic, obviously not, but you need another perspective that's outside rather than inside. So, but when it comes to a group, if you're in a tough work environment, there's no doubt that people are going to be feeling a lot of similar things. And some of that may, as far as being contagious, maybe not, because everybody's wired a little bit different, and their Resiliency may be a little bit different, but there's certain factors that can lead where everybody's kind of feeling the effects of the environment.
Okay. I work with kids consistently. Kids going through extensive traumas is the hardest thing to see. Any advice on how to limit that take home on a daily basis?
Wow, bless your heart. When it comes to kids, that's a pretty tender spot. Because they're so innocent and vulnerable, and it grieves me to hear of some of the atrocious things that have happened to them, things they've seen, things that have happened to them. To leave it home, are you a verbal processor? I don't know if you're a person of faith or not. But honestly, that's a big one. And you've got to have an outlet and something, sometimes it might be, I heard of a guy that was in a similar situation. And what he would do is when he got home, he had something in the garage. He just put his hand on the garage saying, I've got to leave all the garbage right here for now, because I can't take it in my house. And that was a symbolic act for him. And that was a way to say, okay, you know what? There may be some things I got to deal with tomorrow, but my family needs me. And it's like, there's certain things, again, you can't control. It's hard to separate yourself when you've been exposed to that trauma, but maybe you need to have some time with somebody to visit with, to kind of help you process that and dump it. You know what I mean? That would be my encouragement, because it's hard. We had a deputy that, and I say this, I don't even want to have to repeat it, but he had to watch a video of something happening to an infant that I felt a rage and I wanted to vomit all at the same time. And I'm like, that is so bloody evil, wicked. It challenged how I thought about whoever. I don't know who the perpetrator was, but it took him a while to get past that, because you can't unhear, you can't unsee. But I said, you know what, brother, we're just going to go get us some coffee and we're just going to talk. We don't even have to talk about that. And over time, he would just kind of spit it out. And sometimes it was just being there, letting him talk about whatever. And it took time, but then it was like, okay, he's not struggling, with those images and things like that. But strongly encourage you to find somebody to talk to that can help you navigate and release that, because that's not easy.
Okay, I'm going to read a couple of these questions. They might be previously answered or maybe be able to answer together. How do you support and receive support from your team? What do you all do to help each other not feel compassion fatigued? And do you feel the fatigue is seasonal, or is it linked to stress levels?
Okay, so as far as a team goes, encouraging one another, it's kind of having that space. It's kind of like you can't share your heart with everybody, but there's people that you gravitate to. And if you're in leadership, I would really try to create a culture to say, you know what, when things are pretty intense, we need to have a spot we got to dump this and we got to talk about it and ventilate. We don't want to turn into a gripe session. Well, hey, management just sucks and all that. No, that's not the point. But it's creating that safe space for the team that they can just process and they can verbalize that. And can you repeat the second part of that question?
Yes. Is fatigue seasonal or linked to stress levels?
I believe it is absolutely stress level related, because I've had it happen. Obviously on one hand, some people suffer seasonal disorders like winter or whatever, but I believe it's mostly due to stress and what's going on, because it can happen at any time. It can be middle of summer, it can be spring, it can be whatever.
Would you please repeat / clarify the USTAs?
Absolutely. The USTAs are the things that you used to do. Like I used to ride my bike. I used to paint. I used to put on a CD and just sing at the top of my lungs and alone in my house because it's what those are the uses. I used to love to get together with friends for game night. I used to love going to a museum, or I used to love to just, hey, let's go out and enjoy a good meal together. By the uses, it means it's those things that you used to do that you no longer do. Because maybe you don't feel like you've got the energy for it or the capacity for it. So by the uses, that's what I mean by that. I hope that helps clarify that for you.
I found it was harder to leave work at home when working from home. Your experience?
Yes, I can relate to that because as you can tell by the rave lights in the background, I actually have an office in my home. So that's going to require some discipline. The commute is great. The trip to the coffee pot's fantastic. And, but you still have to keep some healthy boundaries. For me, that was a big challenge because I'm like, oh, well, you know what? I'm right here. I can just go in my office for an hour and that hour turns into 2 or 3. And it's like, nope, when I'm powering off the computer, I'm closing the door, it's done. And that's the discipline that it's going to take to say, no, I'm going to have to, it's like, you leave work. So maybe you need to close the office door and say, nope, it'll be there tomorrow if it's that kind of thing.
In dealing with foster care children and foster families in conjunction with the foster care board I serve on, I sometimes come away with angry feelings that stem from the system that it seems has failed the vulnerable children in the foster care system. How do I deal with the resentment and anger I feel sometimes?
Wow, bless your heart. I can't even imagine. Thank you for what you do in that. Again, I can't even imagine those challenges and the stuff that you're exposed to. First of all, I really want to validate the reality of that anger because there's an injustice. There's things going on with that. Some of that is, whatever you have control over is what you have control over. Some of that, you'll have to find that outlet for you on how to dump that anger because obviously you can't carry it. That's where people get ulcers and things like that and develop other health issues by just holding it in. So if you can find a healthy outlet on how to get rid of that anger and all those things that you're feeling about that so you don't carry it around. And that's going to be some things for you to discover of what you like to do, of how to dump that out. For me, exercises, again, I'm not some Adonis. I just know there's certain things physically I have to do that helps me burn stress and things like that. But you'll find what's going to work for you.
I believe that's all the questions that have come through. We have several comments about what a wonderful presentation, great insight, info. Thank you so much. And so I will share those with you too. I will send those.
Great. And I will email you the slides too.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. Everyone enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.
Terrific. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
This was great.
My pleasure. Keep smiling as well. Makes people wonder what you're up to.
Well, now we have to tell everybody to stay warm too, because who knows what this weather's going to be in Nebraska.
That's right. Snowmageddon 3 of here in the heartland. So terrific. Well, thank you again so much. It's been a privilege and an honor. And any way I can serve you guys, just let me know.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.